We're joined here on FlowFM by the member for Lowan, the National Party Deputy Leader in Victoria, Emma Kealy. Emma, how are you going today?
I'm great, thank you, Ricky.
Something that's not sounding too great, you've got concerns about whether the wood chopping will happen at the agricultural shows. In your capacity as Shadow Agriculture Minister, what have you found out?
Yeah, it's very concerning to hear that the wood chop, I think it's one of those events that so many ag shows have every single year. Some of them have had them for 100 years. And it's something that all the kids love to go and see, and the adults too. It's under threat this year, and we're already seeing some wood chop events be cancelled simply because Vic forests don't have any capacity to harvest our native timber, and therefore we can't supply timber to these events. It's very concerning, and probably just what we're seeing from the Andrews Labor government. They're putting lots of restrictions in place in terms of native timber harvesting. It's to appease inner city voters, but as a result, we're starting to lose some of the culture that we really embrace strongly in regional Victoria.
Now, this is a matter that's before the courts in the sense that I understand some environmental regulation are in place to protect. Is it sugar gliders or flying squirrel equivalents? This is the main reason for it. But even if the court falls down in the favour of the logging industry, we're still going to have not only wood chopping but even paper shortages in Victoria for a while yet.
Yeah, that's right. There's a real threat for Australian white paper into the future. It looks like we will be losing that to an overseas entity. So very concerning that the Andrews Labor government, when questioned about this in Parliament, they really take a big step back and aren't willing to step up for our native timber industry. Now, it's sustainable, the trees regrow, and in fact it's an amazing way to ensure that we're sequestering the maximum amount of carbon we possibly can. So cutting down trees isn't necessarily a bad thing because new trees grow in their place, and because trees sequester the most carbon in their first 20 to 30 years of their life, then you're actually sequestering more carbon, taking more carbon from the atmosphere, and there's a better environmental outcome if you do that.
Yeah, so that's what you're getting at there is forestry rather than just leaving the trees to become 200-year-old trees potentially is actually the better way of bringing carbon out of the dioxide out of the atmosphere.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't mean we want to cut down those 200-year-old trees. There's absolutely a place to ensure we do have those old growth forests, and that's not what I'm talking about, but talking about having a native forestry industry so that we can manage it locally in Australia, which means we do use sustainable strategies, unlike when you're looking at putting offshore all of our timber harvesting operations. It means that we don't understand the level of regulation. We don't understand what animal species might be put at risk because of that. And of course, there's a loss of Australian jobs, of Victorian jobs, and the ability to buy a Victorian product, which we all like to do quite proudly.
And back on the wood chopping, we saw during the pandemic when events were cancelled, it was hard to get them up off the ground again. Could the cancellation of these wood chopping events mean it's difficult to get them going again if we do get the timber supply sorted out?
Yeah, that's often the case. I mean, particularly with wood chop. I mean, I don't know whether you've met any wood chop families, but they literally are passing on their skills from generation to generation. It would be really devastating for some of those families who've got 3, 4, 5 generations of wood choppers to not be able to go ahead and participate in that sport. So as we know, as soon as something stops, it's really hard to get back up and running again. But this is an important one to fight for, and I'd really be sad to see wood chop events go at ag shows into the future.
Something else that's had the chop, according to what the opposition's had to say in recent years, is jobs at Agriculture Victoria. Is there still a continuing concern that when it comes to the biosecurity threats we're facing, that perhaps we won't have the staff to handle it?
Yeah, it's a real concern, and look, even more concerning, Ricky, was last week in Parliament when the Minister for Agriculture was questioned about preparedness for avian flu, which we're seeing some of the H5 strains transfer to animals very rapidly at the moment in the Northern Hemisphere. When the Minister for Agriculture in Victoria was asked about that, she actually had no idea of that threat. Now, I'm concerned that we've got a department that doesn't seem to have an understanding of some of the wider threats to biosecurity and our poultry stock in particular in Victoria, especially given, Victoria is the last place in Australia that had a bigger outbreak of avian flu. We lost an enormous amount of poultry. It took a big hit on our egg industry as well. So Victoria really needs to do a lot better. We can't just be resting and waiting for these sort of biohazard threats to arrive here before the government does anything. We actually need a very strong preparedness plan in place. And of course, if we don't have the staff on the ground, the hands-on staff to be able to implement those plans, then we're really putting our whole agricultural industry in Victoria at risk.
And just on the state parliament, the first chance we've had to chat with you since the first sitting week of the year, the National Party had a stronger hand in terms of the number of members of the coalition, some more queens, if I can put it there that way, in your hand now, thanks to some positive election results. What was the mood within the coalition?
Yeah, we've had a fabulous last week in Parliament. Our 5 new members of Parliament absolutely did a stellar job in terms of putting forward a strong voice for regional Victoria, and with all of their inaugural speeches done by Tuesday, aside from one, we saw a real shift in tact from the government where all of their ministers' statements on Wednesday were focused on regional matters, and I think that truly shows the government is being reactive. They're really concerned about this strong voice that's emanating from regional Victoria coming from the Nationals benches. So we'll keep that up for the coming 4 years and take it up to them for the next election.
Emma Kealy, the Deputy Leader of the Nationals in Victoria, thanks so much for sharing that with us, and we'll catch you again soon.
Thanks, Ricky.